A powerful family rocked by tragedy.
Her father is a prominent judge.
She found her husband unresponsive on the couch. There's a great deal of blood.
Investigators pry into a guarded reputation.
The family name was synonymous with law and order.
It made the front page of the papers.
In a tightly knit community, secrets rarely stay hidden.
She was staying out late into the night, partying.
He did everything he could to pursue a relationship.
She continued to turn him down.
The truth reveals a money-hungry killer consumed by greed.
She was one of those gimme, gimme, gimme people. She wanted the money, she wanted that house.
She could get a man to do just about anything for her.
He was a puppy dog after her.
She promised him money and marriage.
Desperate people do desperate things. She was a desperate person.
The town of St. Charles sits on the banks of the Missouri River, just 20 miles from St. Louis.
Back in the 90s, the young professionals kind of flocked this area. Everything was new.
St. Charles at that time was a small community that was up and coming. A lot of everybody knew everybody type of thing.
October 12th, 1991. A 911 call interrupts a leisurely Saturday in the middle-class community.
Fire and ambulance emergency.
Yes, I need somebody to come out here right away. There's blood all over.
Sometime around noon, the police received a 911 call by Lisa Suter, who had gone home, and she found her husband, Alfred, also known as Freddie, unresponsive on the couch.
Okay, is he awake now?
No, I think he's dead. He's not moving.
It was rather calm and collected. There was no hysterics. There was no screaming into the phone.
She could have been in shock. That happens quite a bit. You could have all kinds of reactions from people that walk in on something like this.
There's blood everywhere.
Okay, how old is he?
He's 34.
34? Okay, we'll get somebody out there right away, ma'am.
Okay.
The police showed up along with St. Charles Fire Protection District, EMS. They kept her outside.
First responders arrived. They went over to Alfred, and they found that he was, in fact, deceased. There was nothing they could do. It was obvious that he had been shot.
There's a great deal of blood. What looked like a wound to the back of the head and an exit wound in the front of the face was shot down from an angle, from behind him and downwards. They find a shell casing from a 9mm on the couch.
There doesn't seem to be a sign of a struggle. The house is not ransacked. There aren't necessarily valuables missing.
Freddie was an awesome, friendly, sparkling person. It didn't make sense who would do that.
Born on June 1st, 1955 in Grindelwald, Switzerland, Alfred Freddie Suter spent his childhood surrounded by the breathtaking Alps.
It's very pretty, high mountains and chalets, lots of snow in the winter, nice in the summer.
By his mid-20s, Alfred was a gifted engineer at the international machinery manufacturer Hydromat.
Alfred was really talented at the career that he chose. He was really well respected.
When Alfred was 26, he was offered a life-changing opportunity.
In 1981, Alfred and his mentor and friend Bruno Schmitter relocate to the United States to start a branch of Hydromat. They were really building things from the ground up when they began working here in the St. Louis area.
He came over for the American dream. He wanted to get ahead He was sort of a little bit of an adventurer, and he wanted to get out and enjoy life.
Freddie bought a home in St. Charles and found a group of friends among his fellow expats.
He would go up to the bar, and he had his friends that would show up too and play pool.
After 6 years in Missouri, Freddie was out one evening with friends when the unexpected happened.
We were sitting at the bar, and the bartender brought Freddie a beer, and the bartender said the gal across the bar ordered that beer for him. He went over there and they thanked her, and that's the way he met Lisa.
12 years Freddie's junior, Lisa was the youngest of Donald and Carlene Dalton's 6 children.
Lisa Dalton grew up in a pretty prominent family in the St. Charles area with a life of privilege, with a silver spoon in her mouth.
Her father is Judge Dalton. He's a prominent judge in the St. Charles County court systems.
For more than 40 years, he had never lost an election for public office. The Dalton name was synonymous with law and order. For Lisa, that meant a little bit of pressure to live up to the family name. She needed to meet certain expectations. Lisa graduated from high school in 1985, and after that, she attended college, where she seemed to be an average to above average student.
While out with her friends, Lisa spotted Freddie across the bar.
When they met, Lisa was 20 and Alfred was 32. There was a significant difference there.
She was pretty charming. Freddie saw something in her.
A whirlwind romance started on the spot.
In 1987, less than a year after meeting, Alfred and Lisa were married, and Lisa moved in with Alfred at their home in St. Charles.
He was just overjoyed, and they were in love with each other. She was just a lovely young lady that he was just all excited about.
The Dalton family welcomed the brainy Swiss engineer with open arms.
Lisa's family thought that Lisa had finally hit the jackpot. He was a lead engineer at his company, so he was able to provide for her.
Lisa eventually left college to join the workforce.
Lisa was going to become a police officer, and she applied for the St. Charles County, Missouri Police Academy.
Lisa's career in law enforcement would prove to be short-lived.
Lisa was hired by the Hazelwood Police Department. There she went through her field training phase. I don't believe she made it off field training. She had hurt her ankle, and that was the end of her law enforcement career.
In 1991, Lisa embarked on a new venture.
Lisa began LA Designs, which was a wholesale fragrance business. She had investors, and then she eventually brought in employees.
The perfumes were well known. They were knockoffs, but they were well known. I applied for a job, and I was pretty much hired on the spot to sell perfume. When everybody gathered their box full of perfume and got ready to go out, and it's like, we're gonna do this, we're gonna sell a ton of it. We were told that there's a few top sellers that they'd go out and they'd come back and their boxes would be empty, and everybody's like, oh, well, they can do it, I can do it.
As Lisa and Alfred embark on their new business venture, they seem to have a bright future ahead. But after only 4 years together, all of that comes crashing down when Lisa finds her husband murdered. As Lisa waits outside the couple's home, St. Charles homicide investigators get their first look at Alfred's body.
As we were examining blood, there were 3 droplets that led from the couch towards the basement door.
Investigators consider whether an intruder broke in and snuck up on Alfred from behind.
We went down the stairs into the basement, and we found a basement window that had been broken. The glass was laying outside the house rather than inside the house.
Whoever broke the window did so from the inside.
it told us that possibly if it was staged. If a stranger is going to knock on the door and force their way in, they're probably going to do the shooting right then and there. They're not going to let you sit down on the couch to watch TV and then shoot you from behind.
Someone was there who Freddie trusted and knew.
Alfred knew the person who killed him. We just had to figure out who that was.
Coming up, could an innocent crush have turned deadly?
He apparently was totally infatuated with Lisa.
And the investigation takes a high-profile turn.
Her dad, Judge Donald Dalton, showed up at the crime scene.
St. Charles County Sheriff's deputies are at the home of Lisa and Alfred Suter. Alfred lies dead on the couch from a gunshot wound to the head. When investigators step outside to speak with Lisa, they find she is no longer alone.
Her dad, Judge Donald Dalton, showed up at the crime scene and asked to be let into the crime scene.
Most of the officers on the scene would have known who Judge Dalton was.
They still told him that he could not enter, at which point he respected that decision.
With the powerful judge's presence looming over the case, investigators make a decision.
The St. Charles County Sheriff's Department called for an activation of the Major Case Squad to keep politics out of it.
That meant that police officers from many local police departments, some miles away from the crime, were called and converged to investigate.
The first thing we heard was that a judge's daughter found her husband murdered. So everything had to be done absolutely perfect in this case.
The same day Alfred's body is found, the Major Case Squad takes over. As their first order of business, they do a thorough sweep of the Suter home.
Alfred was on the couch facing the television, kind of slumped over. The kitchen area was directly behind him.
They find some weapons on the kitchen counter along with a cleaning kit. The assumption here is that Freddie had his guns out and was cleaning them.
The possibility that there had been a gun there that the murderer could have grabbed and used was an option.
However, investigators discover a significant problem with their first theory.
Police found a 9mm shell casing. The firearms that were out on the table didn't match the bullet casings.
None of them had been used as the murder weapon. We had to identify if there were any guns owned by either Lisa or Alfred that were missing.
When investigators step outside to ask Lisa, they find she has been joined by another powerful family member.
Her brother, who was a prominent attorney, had showed up.
Attorney Gene Dalton announces he is acting as his sister's counsel. He allows Lisa to answer questions about the guns.
Lisa told the police about all the weapons that she owned. She had a Beretta 9mm that was not found in the kitchen. They escorted her upstairs and looked for that 9mm Beretta. It was nowhere to be found. The 9mm Beretta is missing.
Lisa and her brother head to the station to answer more questions. There, Lisa tells investigators she didn't spend the previous night at home.
Did he say what he was going to do last night?
No, I spent about 2 minutes on the phone with you, and that was it. Just basically that I didn't think I was going to be home. We had a big contest in my office.
Lisa said she was with a friend who actually works for Lisa at Lisa's perfume company. They apparently went to a celebration, and when they returned the next day, she came home and discovered her husband on the couch like that.
I'll be real honest with you. The whole population of St. Charles County is a suspect right now. For a fact, you're a possible suspect.
She tells the police that her and Alfred have a happy marriage, they have a normal home life. She had nothing to do with what happened to Alfred.
Who do you think would want to hurt Fred?
Nobody that I know of.
Nobody?
No.
She wasn't allowed to say much because her brother, who is a skilled attorney, was with her.
After the interview, investigators follow up on her alibi.
Her friend confirmed that Lisa was with her and spent the night with her over at her home.
With Lisa in the clear, investigators look to Alfred's closest and oldest friend.
They contacted Bruno Schmitter, who was Alfred's friend and mentor. They interviewed him, and he was, of course, shocked and sad by Alfred's death.
Like Lisa, he says Alfred had no enemies, but he points out that the Suter marriage wasn't perfect.
Freddie was truly in love with Lisa, and at first he was happy. But the longer the relationship went, she became a different person, basically. She also liked her freedom, so she started going out. It got much worse when Lisa decided she wanted to become a police officer. Lisa brought her work home with her by bringing fellow classmates home with her to party, drink, hang out, do things up until very late hours of the night when Freddie had to get up the next morning and go to work.
I talked to him a little bit about his relationship. You could tell there was problems.
Certain that Lisa's attorney brother will deflect that line of questioning, investigators instead contact her instructors at the academy.
She went to the academy, mediocre grades, but she did graduate. She was a probationary officer for 3 months.
The field training officer was quite open and honest and said that her evaluation process was poor, barely acceptable. She had a personality that exemplified she expected others to do the work for her.
They were going to continue her probation because she simply was not cutting the mustard. So 3 days after she was notified about being put on further probation, Lisa had an ankle injury and she simply resigned.
He points them to Debbie Young, Lisa's closest friend at the academy.
Debbie told police that she hadn't seen Lisa in a while, but that they were close while they were at the police academy.
I asked her what her opinion of Lisa was. Debbie's answer was, Lisa was the kind of person who could get a man to do just about anything for her. Debbie had told me about a gentleman by the name of Richard, and he apparently was totally infatuated with Lisa. He would bring her roses, presents, offered to do homework for her.
He did everything he could to pursue a relationship with Lisa Suter.
At first, Lisa enjoyed the attention, but eventually she told Richard to knock it off.
Richard didn't really take that news very well and continued to pursue Lisa, sending her notes and small gifts.
He was trying to get her to date him, even though she continued to turn him down.
Debbie described Richard as somebody who was maybe a little unstable and would do strange things like boast about getting into fights over women.
He was wanting to get with Lisa. If he would get rid of the husband, he has free reign to be with her.
Richard had raised some red flags, and we had to get those red flags answered.
Police bring Richard in for questioning, and he denies any involvement in Alfred's murder. He said he had never had any sort of issue with Alfred and that he didn't know him that well.
He seemed totally open and honest, willing to help us in any manner, shape, or form.
Richard says the romance between himself and Lisa wasn't a one-way street.
Lisa went out with him. He said that they had dated.
Lisa wanted to cut it off. He wanted her back, and she said no.
They had a relationship that he tried to get to go further, but that after the academy, there had been no further contact.
Richard was a police officer. He really didn't have a motive to kill anybody, especially Freddie Suter. He also had an airtight alibi that he was nowhere near the crime scene.
We were able to verify that alibi and rule him out. He was no longer a suspect.
Richard may be a dead end, but investigators see that the Suter marriage was not as picture perfect as Lisa let on.
There's obvious evidence that that relationship is not healthy. Those conflicting statements just throw a bunch of red flags up. Lisa's not being totally honest. There's something not quite right here we need to investigate further.
Coming up, Alfred's co-workers disclose chilling allegations.
All of us pretty much pointed the finger at her right off the bat.
Alfred had woken up one night and she was pointing a gun at his head.
The night after engineer Alfred Suter is gunned down on his couch, authorities begin paying visits to his coworkers.
Police decided to ask as many people as they could about Alfred, his relationship with Lisa.
We were all just flabbergasted. I mean, we were just like, nobody could believe it.
After the shock wears off, the employees are eager to assist.
All of us pretty much pointed the finger at Lisa right off the bat, no hesitation. But we just felt, who else would do something like that to Freddie?
They report that the marriage had been troubled from the start.
Freddie got married to Lisa pretty quick. It went well for the first couple of years, and then they separated.
She went home to her parents, and they said, "You can't come home. You're supposed to be married. You go back to Freddie." So here she comes with her tail between her legs.
And then a year later, Freddie's back with her.
Soon after, Lisa started her business, LA Design Perfume. It became another sore spot in the already tense relationship.
Freddie was the financial backing for LA Design. I don't know the exact amount, but quite a bit of money to Lisa for this company. And he was seeing nothing in return.
Freddie was continually feeding her money to keep it afloat. She would keep going back to him, begging for help.
His coworkers report that Alfred was finally done.
It was obvious that Lisa and Alfred were not sleeping in the same bedroom. He had been complaining about how the marriage was over. He was trying to get her to leave him and divorce him. She was refusing to move out of the house because if she had moved out, she wouldn't get the house.
She was going to stay there. She wanted Freddie's money, and she wanted Freddie's house. She was one of those gimme, gimme, gimme people.
Lisa dug in her heels and turned to intimidation.
One coworker said that Alfred told him that he had woken up one night and Lisa was pointing a gun at his head.
Lisa had said, "See what I could do to you anytime I want."
It wasn't a healthy relationship in any way, and you could tell Freddie was afraid.
Investigators look into the rumored financial troubles.
I did a little background on LA Design and found it to be kind of along the lines of a pyramid-style scheme or business. She would buy cases of imitation cologne from a company in another state, and then she was allowed to sell them at whatever price she thought was appropriate. She got these employees to sell them for more than what they would have to pay Lisa for, which was more than what Lisa paid the original company for.
Hoping to gain additional insight, investigators visit LA Design and speak with several employees.
We interviewed various coworkers. I learned that they were losing money and probably going to have to close up shop.
Several of the employees observed that Lisa is a little flirtatious with some of the men in the business. Well, some people described her as promiscuous, and that Lisa could be manipulative with men to get what she wanted.
Lisa even bragged about how she was getting in shape, and she had a girlfriend who she became friends with and would go out with and pick up guys with.
Investigators are informed that Lisa was especially fond of a certain employee, 23-year-old Danny Johnson.
There were rumors going around that Lisa and Danny were seeing each other. Did I notice it? Maybe they seemed real friendly, but was it overtly? No.
While Lisa seemed to like Danny, he wasn't popular with everyone.
Most of them just got a bad feeling about who he was and how he handled himself.
He was off. Danny would have been more submissive. He was a puppy dog after Lisa. He just didn't seem like everybody else. He wasn't the norm.
Neither Lisa nor Danny are present at the time of questioning. Armed with this new information, investigators leave and refocus on their new potential suspect.
Danny told a lot of people that he was a police officer from Salt Lake City. Nothing could be further from the truth.
We found that Danny did have a criminal record in another state. I believe it was assault third. Knowing what we just found out about Danny Johnson is we need to bring him in and talk to him a little bit deeper. We'd had enough information to bring him in for questioning.
When police first talked to Danny, he says he doesn't know that much about Lisa and Alfred's relationships, that they didn't really talk about that very much at work. But over time, his story changes.
Danny slowly starts to admit that he was friends with Alfred.
She had brought him to meet Alfred, and the two of them hit it off over sports, and that he was often over there without Lisa being around.
Police aren't buying that Danny was closest with Alfred. They continue to press.
He broke down and said, yes, her and I have been seeing each other. He was under the impression that Lisa was going to leave Alfred and marry him.
Investigators know that Lisa didn't fire the shot that killed Alfred. Now, they wonder if Danny did.
So we then treated him not just as a coworker or a friend of the family, but as a suspect, and started doing a deeper dive into who he was and where he may have been on the night of the homicide.
Coming up, a witness connects the dots.
She had seen Danny cleaning a semi-automatic pistol.
And a cold-hearted scheme is exposed.
The plan was to make this look like a home invasion.
Two days into Freddie Suter's murder investigation, the Greater St. Louis Major Case Squad has just learned that Freddie's wife, Lisa, was dating her employee.
Lisa was having an affair with Danny Johnson.
He and Lisa had been having relations, that he had been a friend of Alfred's.
With Danny denying any involvement and Lisa protected by her high-powered family, investigators look for proof to back up the rumors that Lisa was in dire financial straits.
One of the things we found was that Lisa had major debt problems. She could barely pay her own bills. If it wasn't for Alfred's money, she wouldn't be able to keep the business up and running.
The police found out that Lisa was well over $100,000 in debt.
Investigators learned that Freddie's death could give Lisa an out.
Alfred had recently gotten a life insurance policy for $100,000. And Lisa had contacted that life insurance company shortly after, trying to increase it to $200,000. Unsuccessful at the time because she needed Alfred's signature.
Lisa saw this money as a way to escape. She could move on with her lifestyle the way she wanted.
Lisa's alibi proves she didn't pull the trigger. But her lover, Danny Johnson, isn't in the clear.
Danny's address led us to a house that this woman and her children lived at, and her name was Dorothy. Dorothy was Danny's landlord, but she would be willing to talk to us. Dorothy told me that Danny was a good kid. She felt that he was kind of a son.
She had helped other young adults by giving them a place to stay, providing them with a room until they can get on their feet again. And Danny Johnson was one of the people that she had helped out.
She knew a little bit about what was going on. He told her about how Lisa was his girlfriend. Lisa had promised him money and marriage.
Dorothy discloses that Danny recently made troubling comments about his lover.
Dorothy tells the police that Danny said that Lisa had been looking for a hitman on her husband, Alfred.
Danny had made a comment just a few days before the homicide that he and Lisa had trouble finding a hitman, so he would have to do the murder himself. A lot of times when people hear statements like that made, they think a person's just ranting and raving and they don't mean to follow through with those things. So a lot of times people will not call the police.
Dorothy didn't take the comments seriously, nor did she think much about what she saw on the night of October 11th.
She also told me the night of the homicide, she had seen Danny sitting in the living room of her house, cleaning a semi-automatic pistol.
On October 14th, investigators confront Danny with Dorothy's statement.
By the time they had made it down to the Jennings Police Department, he was in custody as a suspect, the lead suspect.
Faced with Dorothy's claims, Danny still denies involvement.
They ask him to take a polygraph test.
He passed most of the questions. However, when it came to specifics about were you involved in Alfred's homicide, and do you know anything about the gun used in Alfred's homicide, he failed those questions.
Authorities confront Danny with the results.
Look, you know you failed the polygraph, and it's kind of in your best interest to tell us what you know, because we know you were involved somehow. Talk to us.
Danny knew that he was boxed into a corner. Danny said that Lisa had told him that if they were truly to be together and start a life together, that Alfred would have to be killed. The plan that Lisa had was to make this look like that this was a home invasion. Like an intruder broke into the home, saw firearms at the table, and grabbed it and was able to kill Alfred at the scene.
She told Danny how to stage the house, including breaking a basement window to look as if it was a burglary gone bad, where the gun would be, and what to do with the gun afterwards.
Lisa convinced Danny that he should be the one to kill Alfred.
As soon as this was all settled, they would get married.
Danny tells investigators he attempted to put the plan into motion on October 10th.
He said he also chickened out. He couldn't go through with it. Lisa Suter was absolutely furious and sent him back to her home the next night.
Danny, on the night of October 11th, went over to the house. Alfred let him in. They hung out together. And under Danny's jacket, he had brought a gun with him. Lisa had given Danny her 9mm gun to use as the murder weapon.
They were talking and drinking, watching television. Freddie fell asleep. When Freddie was asleep, he went up behind Freddie and blew the back of his head off.
Once he actually pulled the trigger, he kind of panicked, and he didn't leave the house in as big a mess as Lisa had originally told him to make it look like a burglar had been there.
He haphazardly set up what was supposed to be a break-in.
This was a horrible, heinous murder, but it was done in a very amateurish way. Nothing was done correctly. Danny Johnson said that he went over the bridge, crossing the Missouri River, and threw the gun into the river.
At that point in his interview, Danny was placed under arrest.
He even took us out to that location where he tossed it in, and we sent divers down to try to locate it, but that was to no avail.
On October 15th, authorities prepare to arrest the prominent Missouri woman they believe is the mastermind.
All roads led back to Lisa, especially after the statement given by Danny Johnson. So Lisa was arrested by turning herself in. All that was said was basically her husband was murdered, she found him, and knew nothing else.
Lisa does post bond. It's a $500,000 bond.
She did not have to spend time in jail. Her parents' house was used as collateral on a property bond, which allowed Lisa freedom to leave after being arrested.
Lisa's arrest is big news in St. Charles.
The presiding circuit judge's daughter is accused of brutally murdering her husband? Yes. It made the front page of the papers.
Despite the stain of her alleged crimes, prosecutors learn Lisa's family might be their biggest obstacle.
She had a father who was a presiding circuit judge. No judge in St. Charles County or anywhere close by was going to touch that case.
Missouri authorities have arrested Lisa Suter and her lover, Danny Johnson, for the murder of her husband, Alfred. The high-profile case struggles to find a home.
There are 4 circuit judges in St. Charles County, and they all excused themselves because they knew Lisa Suter's father, Judge Dalton. They went to Boone County, and that is Columbia, Missouri, right in the middle of the state. That is where the case was tried.
On February 22, 1993, Lisa's trial begins in Boone County, 2.5 hours away from where the crime took place.
Lisa pleads not guilty and maintains that she had nothing to do with Alfred's murder.
Her lover and co-conspirator stands by his confession.
Danny Johnson took a plea deal. He was offered life without parole if he would testify against Lisa Suter, which he did.
The prosecution uses Danny as their star witness, and he turns against Lisa, telling the jury that it was her idea to kill Alfred to collect the life insurance policy. Danny also described Lisa as manipulative, greedy, and somebody who would do anything to get what she wanted.
Danny Johnson told the whole story exactly the way it really happened. He was promised many things and got nothing. She wanted everything that a single woman could have, but without Freddie. She saw the only way to get all these things was by Freddie leaving the scene with a bullet through his head.
Next, prosecutors drop a bombshell. They allege Lisa made previous attempts to have Freddie killed.
The state brought in 2 other men who she had solicited to do the murder. They were very clear on the stand when they testified. She asked them to kill her husband.
She had left a trail of crumbs here that show that she was going to get this done any way she could have.
Lisa's defense team takes aim.
The tactic, the only thing you could do is try and discredit the witnesses against her. We cross-examined the 2 guys and make them out to be fortune hunters. They just wanted the 15 minutes of fame. If we can show that they are not credible or parts of their story don't make sense, if there's no credible evidence, then you can't find somebody guilty.
Lisa never takes the stand. Her attorneys present her as a lost and lonely young woman.
She wanted out. She tried to divorce the guy. Her parents wouldn't let her. She's stuck in a marriage that she doesn't want to be in. She's in her early 20s. And what's she going to do? She developed a plan to free herself.
They allege this led to Lisa's affair with Danny and the deadly consequences that followed.
She denied everything and blamed Danny doing this all on his own.
Desperate people do desperate things. She was a desperate person, more desperate than anybody realized.
On February 25th, 1993, the jury reaches its verdict.
Lisa was found guilty of murder in the first degree.
Lisa was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
I was glad that there is justice because she was the instigator, even though she had people to actually do the murder. It was her. She was just evil, evil, evil.
Freddie was just that friendly, and he was taken advantage of to the extreme. It just broke everybody's heart. You kind of lost a little faith, in all humanity over it. There's certain souls out there that they have that spark, that infectious smile. I was able to take some of that with me. Freddie had that magic. And this is the best I can do for it, to carry it on.
The serene bedroom community of Orinda, California, situated just 20 minutes from the bustling downtown of San Francisco, has long been regarded as one of the most prosperous and peaceful enclaves in Contra Costa County, with its winding roads, lush canopies of trees, and elegant estates. The area represents an idyllic retreat where residents seek security and tranquility. In this quiet suburban landscape, violent crimes are exceedingly rare, making any sudden breach of peace a matter of profound shock to the community. Yet beneath the polished exterior of one of the community's most impressive properties, a deep and complex interpersonal conflict was quietly reaching its peak. On the evening of October 14, 2002, the silence of this neighborhood was broken when the local emergency dispatch center received an urgent call shortly after 9 o'clock in the evening. The caller was 15-year-old Gabriel Polk, who reported in a state of high distress that his father, 70-year-old Felix Polk, was lying motionless in the pool house of their expansive estate. Gabriel expressed a belief that his father had been shot, pointing to his mother, Susan Polk, as the person responsible for the incident. The responding deputies from the sheriff's office arrived at the sprawling residence with caution, unsure of what they would find. Gabriel emerged from near the waste containers outside the home, appearing calm but highly direct in his account, directing the deputies toward the detached structure at the rear of the property. As the first officers approached the main residence, they observed a woman through the large glass windows of the home. This was Susan Polk, who appeared remarkably composed under the circumstances. Upon being asked to step outside, she complied, without showing signs of panic or immediate distress, a behavior that immediately drew the attention of the investigators. Meanwhile, a deputy entered the detached pool house and discovered the deceased Felix Polk lying on the floor. It was immediately apparent to the investigators that the scene was highly complex. Although Gabriel had initially suspected a shooting, the physical evidence at the scene suggested that Felix had suffered significant physical trauma that did not align with a firearm wound. The lack of forced entry indicated that whoever had entered the structure was likely known to the victim, and the state of the physical evidence suggested that the incident had occurred several hours prior to the arrival of law enforcement. To fully understand the motives behind this tragic event, it is necessary to examine the history of the relationship between Felix and Susan Polk, a bond that was forged under highly unusual and ethically problematic circumstances decades earlier. Felix Polk was born into a prominent family in Austria in June 1932. His family fled the rise of the Nazi regime, navigating a perilous journey through France before eventually immigrating to New York, where Felix completed his education. After a period of service in the military, during which he sought psychological support for personal challenges, Felix became deeply interested in the field of mental health. He relocated to Berkeley, California, where he earned his doctorate in psychology during the early 1970s, and subsequently established a highly successful practice. In the mid-1970s, Felix was a practicing psychologist, married with 2 children, when he began treating a teenage patient named Susan Bowling. Susan, born in 1957, was an exceptionally intelligent individual who had tested in the 99th percentile of an intelligence test, signaling genius-level cognitive abilities. However, her parents' divorce had left her feeling emotionally vulnerable, prompting her mother to seek professional therapy for her. Over several years, Felix treated the young Susan. According to later disclosures by Susan S. family, the professional relationship gradually crossed established ethical boundaries, developing into an intimate association when Susan was still a teenager and Felix was in his early 40s. This boundary violation represents a critical element in the psychological dynamics of the case. In the field of mental health, the relationship between a therapist and a patient is built on an inherent power imbalance. When a practitioner exploits this vulnerability, it can create a profound and lasting psychological impact on the patient, often referred to by experts as grooming. Although Susan eventually attended San Francisco State University and earned a degree in English and creative writing, her connection to Felix remained strong. The relationship was eventually discovered by another therapist whom Susan consulted, leading to the dissolution of Felix's first marriage. In December 1981, Felix and Susan were married. embarking on a partnership that would last for over 2 decades and produce 3 sons, Adam, Eli, and Gabriel. Despite their outward success, which included managing a valuable real estate portfolio and raising their children in a highly affluent neighborhood, the marriage was plagued by deep-seated tension. By the year 2002, the relationship had severely deteriorated. Susan had begun planning a move to Montana to establish an independent life, a decision that Felix viewed avec great concern. As they moved toward a formal divorce, they established a temporary living arrangement on their property, with Susan occupying the main residence and Felix residing in the pool house. The legal proceedings associated with the divorce rapidly intensified the conflict. In the weeks leading up to October 2002, Felix took significant steps to secure his financial and domestic position. While Susan was away in Montana, Felix obtained a court order granting him temporary sole possession of the family home, custody of their youngest son, and a substantial reduction in the spousal support payments he was required to provide, lowering the amount from $6,000 per month to $1,700 per month. Upon her return, Susan was confronted with these legal developments, which she refused to accept as valid. She changed the locks on the main home and moved Felix's personal belongings into the pool house. This escalating domestic warfare culminated in a police visit just 3 days prior to the discovery of Felix's body, during which Felix presented the court orders to responding officers, while Susan remained defiant. The physical evidence gathered by investigators played a decisive role in resolving the case. The autopsy conducted on Felix Polk revealed that he had succumbed to multiple sharp force injuries to his torso. Additionally, he had sustained a significant injury to the back of his head, suggesting he had been struck with a blunt object, possibly a heavy flashlight, which investigators theorized was used to incapacitate him before the subsequent struggle. The presence of defensive wounds on Felix's hands indicated that he had attempted to protect himself during the encounter. In contrast, a physical examination of Susan Polk revealed no injuries, scratches, or defensive marks, which cast doubt on any assertion of mutual combat or self-defense. The most critical piece of physical evidence was a small cluster of hair found clutched in Felix's hand. This hair, which had been pulled from the assailant during the struggle, was subjected to rapid genetic analysis. The results confirmed a match with Susan Polk. Furthermore, the timeline established by the medical examiner indicated that Felix had been deceased for nearly 22 hours before the emergency services were contacted, raising serious questions about why Susan had not sought assistance if she had acted in self-defense. Investigators also discovered Felix's vehicle at a nearby transit station, leading to the theory that Susan had attempted to alter the appearance of the crime scene to suggest that Felix had left the property voluntarily or had been targeted by an external threat. Confronted with the genetic evidence, Susan admitted to her involvement in Felix's death, but insisted that she had acted in self-defense. She claimed that during an argument in the pool house, Felix had initiated a physical attack with a weapon, and she had managed to disarm him to protect her own life. She explained her failure to call for assistance by stating she was in a state of shock and feared the impact the event would have on her children. The subsequent trial in March 2006 became one of the most unusual legal proceedings in the history of Contra Costa County. Susan chose to dismiss her legal counsel and represent herself, a decision that drew intense public and media attention. refusing to allow her defense to rely on a psychological evaluation or a claim of diminished capacity. She insisted on presenting her own narrative directly to the jury. Her high intelligence was evident in her sharp cross-examination of several prosecution witnesses, yet her defense was increasingly complicated by highly unconventional assertions. She claimed that Felix was associated with ITHAT international intelligence organizations and possessed advanced knowledge of historical events, assertions that the prosecution characterized as lacking any basis in reality. The trial also highlighted the deep fractures within the Polk family. The three sons found themselves divided by the tragedy. Gabriel and Adam testified for the prosecution, describing a history of maternal hostility and expressing their belief that their mother's actions were premeditated. In contrast, Eli testified in defense of his mother, supporting her claims of past mistreatment by Felix. This intense family division added a profound layer of human tragedy to the courtroom proceedings. After a 22-week trial, the jury rejected the claim of absolute self-defense, finding Susan Polk guilty of second-degree murder. She was subsequently sentenced to 16 years to life in prison. Analyzing the motives behind this crime reveals a complex convergence of psychological trauma, financial desperation, and a perceived loss of control. The long-term consequences of an ethically compromised relationship, established during Susan S. adolescence, likely created a foundation of resentment and psychological instability that persisted throughout the marriage. When the legal system was utilized by Felix to restrict Susan's access to her home, her child, and her financial support, she likely felt entirely cornered. This perceived threat to her independence and security acted as a powerful catalyst, transforming decades of simmering anger into a single act of violence. These tragedies occur with unfortunate frequency in high-conflict domestic disputes, where the parties feel they have exhausted all viable legal and personal options. When individuals become consumed by a desire to prevail in a bitter separation, they may lose sight of rational alternatives, viewing the dispute as a zero-sum conflict where survival requires the total elimination of the opposing party. This mindset is often exacerbated by isolation, a lack of trusted neutral advisors, and a refusal to seek professional mediation. To prevent such outcomes, communities must emphasize the importance of maintaining strict professional boundaries in all therapeutic and counseling environments. The violation of these boundaries by a trusted professional can inflict deep psychological wounds that may take decades to manifest in destructive ways. Additionally, individuals experiencing severe domestic conflict should be encouraged to access objective support networks, including legal counselors, mental health professionals, and domestic mediators who can assist in de-escalating disputes before they reach a critical threshold. For law enforcement, the case underscores the vital role of objective physical evidence and rigorous forensic methodology in uncovering the truth. The meticulous preservation of the crime scene, the rapid collection of genetic material, and the careful analysis of defensive physical marks allowed investigators to construct a clear, scientifically supported narrative that withstood the challenges of a highly unconventional defense. By relying on hard evidence rather than initial behavioral assessments, the justice system was able to achieve a resolution that honored the truth and held the responsible party accountable. The quiet charm of a growing community often provides a sense of security and trust that many cherish. In the early 90s, specifically the year 1991, the historic town of St. Charles, Missouri, was experiencing a notable transformation. Situated on the scenic banks of the Missouri River, just 20 miles from the larger metropolis of St. Louis, it had become a highly desirable location for young professionals. The area was characterized by a pleasant blend of historical architecture, scenic natural beauty, and modern developments. In this tightly knit environment, the social fabric was built on familiarity and reputation. It was a place where neighbors knew one another, and family names carried significant influence. However, when private lives are guarded with intense secrecy to preserve public appearances, a tragic divide can emerge between outward success and internal reality. This division was illustrated in a case that shocked the region, bringing together elements of privilege, financial desperation, and a tragic loss of life. The event began on a peaceful Saturday, October 12, 1991, when a call was placed to the 911 Emergency Dispatch Center. The caller, Lisa Suter, reported that she had returned to her residence around noon and discovered her husband, Alfred Suter, unresponsive on the living room couch. Those who analyzed the recording of the call noted that the communication was conducted in a remarkably calm and collected manner, without the elevated emotional distress or panic that emergency operators frequently encounter during such crises. While medical and psychological experts acknowledge that individuals experiencing sudden shock can sometimes display a detached or subdued response, this distinctive composure immediately stood out to seasoned investigators. Emergency medical services alongside the St. Charles Fire Protection District and local police quickly arrived at the suburban home. First responders secured the area and confirmed that Alfred, who was 34 years old and went by the name Freddie, was deceased. The physical evidence at the scene suggested a complex and tragic event. Alfred had sustained a fatal injury from a firearm. The path of the projectile, which entered from behind and at a downward angle, suggested that he was resting comfortably on the couch and was entirely unaware of any impending threat. The absence of defensive injuries or signs of a physical struggle indicated that there was no confrontation preceding the event. The home itself had not been ransacked, and no valuable possessions were reported missing, which quickly ruled out a typical burglary or robbery gone wrong. A single 9mm shell casing was discovered on the couch, leaving investigators with the task of determining how a weapon had been brought into the home without alerting the victim. The neat state of the residence suggested that the person responsible was someone Alfred recognized and trusted, allowing them to approach him without causing alarm. To comprehend the circumstances leading up to this tragedy, investigators began looking into the life of Alfred Suter. Born on June 1, 1955, in the beautiful mountain village of Grindelwald, Switzerland, Alfred grew up surrounded by the natural beauty of the Alps. He developed a strong work ethic and a passion for engineering, eventually becoming a highly respected technical specialist at the international machinery manufacturer Hydromat. In the year 1981, at the age of 26, Alfred was presented with an opportunity to help establish a new branch of the company in the United States. Along with kept by Hot, his mentor and close friend Bruno Schmitter, he relocated to the St. Louis area. Alfred was characterized by his friends as an adventurous, warm, and highly capable individual who embraced his new life with enthusiasm. He successfully built a career, purchased a home in St. Charles, and established a supportive social circle among Bayotay, Hot local residents, and fellow expatriates. In the year 1987, Alfred S. personal life changed when he met Lisa Dalton at a local establishment. Lisa was 12 years younger than Alfred, and she belonged to a highly influential family in the St. Charles area. Her father, Donald Dalton, was a prominent circuit judge who had served in the county judicial system for over 40 years, never losing an election. The Dalton name was highly respected and deeply associated with the legal establishment, which created a high standard of expectations for the family members. When Lisa and Alfred met, she was 20 years old and he was 32. Despite their different backgrounds and age gap, they experienced a rapid courtship and were married within a year. For a time, the marriage appeared stable, and Alfred was welcomed warmly by the Dalton family, who viewed him as a successful and hard-working provider. However, the partnership soon began to exhibit signs of severe strain. Lisa's career paths were marked by instability. She entered the police academy at the Hazelwood Police Department, but struggled to meet the rigorous training standards. Her field training evaluations were barely acceptable, and after being placed on extended probation, she resigned from the department after just 3 days, citing an ankle injury. Following this brief attempt at law enforcement, Lisa embarked on a business venture in the year 1991, founding a wholesale fragrance company named L.A. Designs. The business operated on a multi-level structure, purchasing imitation perfumes from out-of-state suppliers and reselling them through a network of local representatives. Unfortunately, the company struggled to generate sustainable revenue, and Lisa accumulated substantial debt, eventually exceeding $100,000. Alfred initially provided the financial backing for the venture, consistently investing his own earnings to keep the business afloat, but he received no return on his investments. As financial pressures grew, the emotional distance between the couple widened. Lisa began spending her evenings socializing and partying with friends and associates, often returning home in the early hours of the morning. This lifestyle conflicted directly with Alfred's routine, as his demanding engineering career required him to rise early. The couple began sleeping in separate bedrooms, and the domestic environment became increasingly tense. Alfred's co-workers later reported that he had expressed a desire to end the relationship and seek a divorce, requesting that Lisa move out of the residence. Lisa, however, resisted these efforts, desiring to maintain ownership of the house and access to Alfred's financial support. Co-workers also recounted a deeply concerning incident that Alfred had shared "Ve kept einte hat them," in which he awoke during the night to find Lisa pointing a firearm at him as an act of intimidation. This revelation heightened the concerns of investigators, suggesting that the domestic conflict had escalated far beyond simple marital disagreement. The complexity of the investigation increased when prominent members of the Dalton family arrived at the scene. Judge Donald Dalton requested entry to the residence, but responding officers maintained the integrity of the active crime scene and declined the request, which the judge respected. To ensure a completely impartial inquiry free from local political influence or potential conflicts of interest, the St. Charles County Sheriff's Department formally requested the assistance of the Major Case Squad of Greater St. Louis. This organization brought together skilled investigators from various surrounding jurisdictions to manage the case with the utmost professional objectivity. Shortly thereafter, Lisa's brother, Gene Dalton, an attorney, arrived to provide legal representation for his sister. During the initial interviews, Lisa maintained that she had no involvement in the tragedy, stating that she had spent the previous night at a coworker's home following a business gathering. Investigators conducted a detailed search of the residence and identified several firearms on the kitchen counter alongside a cleaning kit, leading to an initial theory that Alfred might have been cleaning his weapons when the incident occurred. However, ballistic tests confirmed that none of the firearms present matched the casing found near the couch. When questioned about other weapons in her possession, Lisa noted that she owned a 9mm Beretta handgun. A search of the home revealed that this specific firearm was missing from its usual location. A physical examination of the home's exterior and interior revealed critical details that challenged the initial theories. Near the basement door, investigators discovered 3 small droplets of blood. Downstairs in the basement, they located a broken window, which appeared to suggest that an intruder had gained entry. However, a closer analysis by forensic technicians revealed a significant detail. The shattered glass lay entirely on the ground outside the house rather than inside. This logical inconsistency indicated that the window had been broken from the inside, pointing to a deliberate attempt to stage a break-in and mislead the police. This key piece of physical evidence strongly indicated that the person responsible for the act had intimate knowledge of the home and had access to its interior before the window was broken. Investigators shifted their focus to gathering information from individuals close to the family. They interviewed Alfred's close friend and mentor, Bruno Schmitter, who confirmed that the marriage had been troubled for a significant period. Coworkers at Hydromat also provided consistent accounts of Alfred's growing anxiety regarding his domestic situation and his desire to secure a divorce. Additionally, financial investigations revealed that Alfred held a life insurance policy worth $100,000. Investigators discovered that Lisa had recently contacted the insurance company in an attempt to increase the coverage to $200,000. But the request was denied because she could not obtain Alfred's signature. This financial detail provided a clear motive, suggesting that the termination of the marriage would have resulted in a loss of financial support, whereas Alfred's passing would yield substantial insurance benefits and sole ownership of the home. To explore other possibilities, the police looked into individuals who had been associated with Lisa during her time at the academy. A former classmate named Richard was identified as having previously shown an intense interest in Lisa, sending her gifts and attempting to pursue a relationship despite her rejections. Some acquaintances wondered if an unrequited interest could have motivated a confrontation. However, when questioned by investigators, Richard cooperated fully, provided a verified alibi that placed him far from the scene, and was promptly cleared of any suspicion. The focus then turned to the employees of LA Designs. Coworkers noted that a 23-year-old employee named Danny Johnson had developed a close, submissive relationship with Lisa, often acting on her instructions without question. Danny had constructed an elaborate personal history, falsely claiming to be a former law enforcement officer from Salt Lake City, though investigators quickly determined that he actually possessed a prior criminal record in another state. When initial interviews were conducted, Danny's accounts of his movements and his relationship with the family contained inconsistencies. A significant breakthrough occurred when investigators contacted Danny's landlord, a supportive woman named Dorothy, who had provided him with lodging. Dorothy informed the police that Danny had made highly alarming statements in the days preceding the tragedy. He had allegedly mentioned that Lisa was actively seeking someone to eliminate her husband, and further stated that if they could not find an outside individual to perform the task, he would have to do it himself. Crucially, Dorothy also reported that on the evening of October 11th, she had observed Danny in her living room cleaning a semi-automatic handgun. Equipped with this vital testimony, investigators brought Danny in for further questioning and requested that he undergo a polygraph examination. While he answered general questions successfully, his physiological responses indicated deception. When questioned about his direct involvement in the incident and his knowledge of the missing firearm, faced with the strength of the evidence and the results of the examination, Danny's initial denials faltered, and he provided a comprehensive confession. Danny detailed a plan orchestrated by Lisa, who had convinced him that they could build a future together only if Alfred were removed from the situation. He explained that Lisa had provided him with her own 9mm Beretta handgun and instructed him on how to gain entry and carry out the act. She had also designed the plan to stage a burglary, advising him to break the basement window to simulate a forced entry. Danny admitted that he had attempted to carry out the plan on the evening of October 10th, but had lost his nerve and left. Lisa was reportedly highly upset by this failure and insisted that he return the following night. On the evening of October 11th, Danny returned to the residence, where Alfred, unsuspecting of any danger, welcomed him inside. The two spent time talking and watching television. When Alfred eventually fell asleep on the couch, Danny carried out the fatal act using the provided firearm. In the aftermath, he attempted to stage the scene as instructed, but did so in a hasty and careless manner, breaking the basement window from the inside and leaving the glass on the exterior of the house. He then fled the scene and discarded the handgun from a bridge into the Missouri River. Although police divers conducted searches in the designated area, the river's conditions prevented the recovery of the weapon. Following Danny's detailed confession, law enforcement officials moved forward with the arrest of both individuals. On October 15th, Lisa was taken into custody. She was subsequently released on a substantial property bond of $500,000, with her family's home used as collateral, allowing her to remain outside of jail prior to her trial. The arrest of a prominent judge's daughter generated significant public attention and presented unique legal challenges. To ensure a fair and impartial trial, all 4 circuit judges in the phenomenon of domestic crimes motivated by financial greed represents one of the most tragic and complex areas of criminal justice. These cases occur with alarming frequency because they often involve a slow accumulation of personal desperation, entitlement, and the false belief that a sudden acquisition of wealth will resolve deep-seated lifestyle crises. In many instances, the individual masterminding the crime has grown accustomed to a high standard of living, or has succumbed to severe financial debts that they cannot easily repay through honest labor. When a person possesses a high degree of social privilege, they may feel an intense pressure to maintain an outward appearance of success and wealth, which can distort their moral judgment. Rather than accepting the reality of their financial limitations, they begin to view their partner not as a companion, but as a financial asset or an obstacle to their desired lifestyle. This parasitic mindset often leads to the calculation of life insurance benefits, the appraisal of shared properties, and the formulation of schemes to eliminate the partner to inherit their assets without the burden of their presence. When analyzing the most important details and clues that the police rely on to track down perpetrators in these cases, the concept of staging is paramount. Criminals who attempt to stage a crime scene to look like a random burglary or a home invasion almost always leave behind critical physical and behavioral anomalies. One of the most common mistakes made by amateur offenders is the poor execution of a staged break-in. For example, a broken window is a classic element used to simulate an entry point, but basic physics dictates how glass shatters. When a window is broken from the outside by an actual intruder, the vast majority of the glass shards fall inside the building. Conversely, when a window is broken from the inside by an inhabitant attempting to simulate a burglary, the glass is deposited on the exterior ground. This simple yet profound piece of physical evidence instantly alerts experienced detectives that the crime scene has been manipulated by someone who already had access to the interior of the home. Furthermore, the absence of genuinely ransacked drawers, the presence of valuable items left completely undisturbed, and the lack of defensive wounds on the victim strongly suggest that the perpetrator was someone the victim knew and trusted, allowing them to approach without raising any suspicion. The sophistication of criminals in these scenarios is often exposed as a mere illusion when subjected to rigorous investigation. While the mastermind may believe they have constructed a clever plan, their lack of foresight regarding forensic science, behavioral profiling, and the power of financial audits inevitably leads to their downfall. Investigators rely heavily on tracking financial records, noting sudden changes in life insurance policies, and interviewing close associates to build a timeline of events. The psychological strain of carrying out such a heinous act also means that co-conspirators are highly likely to break down under questioning, especially when confronted with physical evidence or the results of polygraph examinations. To prevent such tragic cases, communities must learn to recognize the early warning signs of toxic and financially exploitative relationships, such as extreme possessiveness, manipulation, and secret financial distress. From an investigative perspective, the rapid resolution of these cases is greatly enhanced by the deployment of multi-jurisdictional task forces. By bringing in detectives from outside the immediate locality, law enforcement can eliminate potential conflicts of interest, especially when the suspects have family connections to local power structures, thereby ensuring that the investigation remains objective, thorough, and free from external influence. The tragic story of Alfred Suter, who was affectionately known as Freddie to his friends and family, begins in the beautiful mountain community of Grindelwald, Switzerland. Born on the first day of June in the year 1955, Alfred spent his childhood surrounded by the majestic peaks of the Swiss Alps, developing a deep appreciation for nature and a warm, adventurous spirit. He possessed a natural aptitude for machinery and technical design, which led him to pursue a career in engineering. By his mid-20s, Alfred had secured a respected position at Heidermat, an international machinery manufacturer. In the year 1981, when Alfred was 26 years old, he was presented with an extraordinary opportunity to help establish a new branch of the company in the United States of America. Alongside his trusted mentor and dear friend Bruno Schmitter, Alfred relocated to the St. Louis area in the state of Missouri to pursue his dreams. He purchased a comfortable home in St. Charles, a rapidly growing and close-knit community situated along the banks of the Missouri River. Alfred was a warm, friendly, and hard-working individual who quickly built a positive reputation among his colleagues and fellow expatriates. In the year 1987, Alfred met a young woman named Lisa Dalton at a local establishment in St. Charles. Lisa was 12 years younger than Alfred, and she came from a highly prominent and influential family in the area. Her father, Donald Dalton, was a respected judge who had served in the local court system for more than 40 years without ever losing an election. The Dalton name was synonymous with law, order, and social privilege. Lisa had grown up with many advantages, but she also faced considerable pressure to live up to her family name and meet the high expectations of her social circle. When Alfred and Lisa met, the connection was immediate, and they were married within less than a year. Initially, the marriage seemed prosperous and happy, and the Dalton family welcomed Alfred with open arms, appreciating his stability and his ability to provide a comfortable life for Lisa. However, as the years passed, significant difficulties began to emerge in the relationship. Lisa decided to pursue a career in law enforcement and entered the local police academy. But her performance was mediocre, and she eventually resigned after suffering an ankle injury during her probationary period. Seeking a new venture, she established a wholesale fragrance business named LA Designs, which sold imitation perfumes. The business, however, was structured in an unstable manner that resembled a pyramid scheme, and it quickly began to experience severe financial losses. Instead of seeking a realistic solution, Lisa repeatedly turned to Alfred for financial support, draining his savings to keep the failing business afloat. By the year 1991, Lisa had accumulated debts exceeding $100,000, creating immense strain on the marriage. As the financial difficulties mounted, the emotional distance between the couple grew wider. Alfred began living in a separate bedroom and expressed a desire to end the marriage. But Lisa refused to leave, desperate to retain the house and Alfred's financial assets. Her behavior grew increasingly hostile, to the point where Alfred confided in a coworker that he had once awakened in the middle of the night to find Lisa pointing a firearm at him. In her desperation to escape the marriage while securing Alfred's wealth, Lisa began to plan his demise. She attempted to double Alfred's life insurance policy to $200,000, but she was unable to complete the process without his signature. She then began actively searching for someone to eliminate her husband, approaching multiple individuals with offers of money and marriage. Eventually, Lisa found a willing participant in Danny Johnson, a 23-year-old employee at her perfume company who was deeply infatuated with her. Danny was easily manipulated, acting like a devoted companion around Lisa and believing her promises of a future together. On the night of October 11th, the year 1991, Lisa provided Danny with her own 9mm Beretta firearm. Danny went to the Suter residence, where Alfred, unsuspecting of any danger, welcomed him inside. While Alfred was resting on the couch, Danny fired a fatal shot from behind. Following the instructions provided by Lisa, Danny attempted to stage the scene as a home invasion by breaking a basement window, but his execution was highly flawed, leaving the broken glass on the outside of the house and failing to make the scene look like a genuine burglary. The next day, on October 12th, the year 1991, Lisa returned home after spending the night at a friend's house to establish an alibi. She placed a calm and collected call to the 911 emergency line to report finding her husband unresponsive on the couch. When first responders arrived, they confirmed that Alfred was deceased and had suffered a gunshot wound. The presence of Judge Donald Dalton, aphmau the crime scene, and the subsequent arrival of Lisa S. brother Gene Dalton, who was a prominent attorney, prompted the local sheriff S department to activate the Greater St. Louis Major Case Squad. This decision was crucial in ensuring an impartial and objective investigation, free from any local political influence. The investigation quickly gathered momentum as detectives uncovered the inconsistencies at the crime scene, such as the staged basement window and the missing 9mm firearm. When they interviewed Alfred S. coworkers and friends, they learned of the troubled state of the marriage. Lisa has immense financial debts and her threatening behavior. Investigators also spoke with a former classmate of Lisa S. from the police academy, who described her manipulative nature and identified a man named Richard, who had once been infatuated with her, though Richard was quickly ruled out as a suspect due to a solid alibi. The breakthrough in the case came when detectives located Danny Johnson S., landlord, a woman named Dorothy. Dorothy revealed that Danny had openly talked about his relationship with Lisa and had mentioned that they were looking for a hitman, even stating that he might have to commit the act himself. She also recalled seeing Danny cleaning a semi-automatic handgun on the night of the crime. Armed with this critical information, detectives brought Danny in for questioning. After failing key portions of a polygraph examination regarding his involvement and the murder weapon, Danny broke down and confessed to the entire scheme, explaining how Lisa had masterminded the plot, provided the weapon, and instructed him on how to stage the scene. On October 15th, the year 1991, Lisa was arrested. Although she was able to secure temporary freedom by posting a $500,000 bond using her parents' property as collateral, the evidence against her was overwhelming. Due to her father's position as a prominent judge, all 4 circuit judges in St. Charles County recused themselves from the case to avoid any appearance of bias. The trial was subsequently moved to Boone County in Columbia, Missouri, more than 2 hours away from the scene of the crime. The trial began on February 22nd, the year 1993. Danny Johnson, having accepted a plea agreement of life without parole, testified as the star witness for the prosecution, detailing the entire conspiracy and Lisa's manipulative role. The prosecution also presented testimony from 2 other individuals whom Lisa had previously solicited to harm her husband, establishing a clear pattern of intent. Despite the defense efforts to portray Lisa as a young and desperate woman trapped in an unhappy marriage, the jury found her guilty of first-degree murder on February 25th, the year 1993. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that justice was served for Alfred Suter and that those who sought to exploit his kindness and hard work were held fully accountable. The human mind occasionally harbors a dangerous intersection of entitlement and material desperation, a combination that historically has served as the catalyst for some of the most tragic and unnecessary conflicts in society. When individuals are raised under a canopy of extreme privilege, shielded by the protective influence of a respected family name, they can develop a distorted view of reality. In this warped perspective, other people are not seen as human beings. Vekep, itehat inherent value, but rather as instruments to be used, manipulated, and ultimately discarded when they no longer serve a personal or financial purpose. These tragic occurrences happen, vekep, ite, hot, alarming frequency, because of a fundamental mismatch between luxurious expectations and the discipline required to achieve them, honestly. When an individual refuses to accept the consequences of their own professional and financial failures, The temptation to seek a violent shortcut becomes a dark allure. They convince themselves that they can bypass the natural boundaries of law and order, forgetting that the truth possesses an inherent resilience that eventually dismantles even the most carefully constructed deceptions. In analyzing the methods of modern detection, it becomes clear that law enforcement officers do not rely on intuition alone, but on a meticulous examination of physical inconsistencies and psychological vulnerabilities. The primary clue that almost always exposes a staged crime scene is the violation of basic physical laws. When a perpetrator attempts to simulate a forced entry, they rarely consider the physics of structural damage. A window broken from the inside, for example, will deposit the vast majority of its glass fragments on the exterior of the dwelling, instantly signaling to experienced investigators that the narrative of an external intruder is entirely fabricated. Furthermore, criminals often suffer from a profound lack of sophistication. Even when they believe themselves to be master planners, they frequently rely on vulnerable, infatuated individuals to execute their plans, failing to realize that a conspiracy built on emotional manipulation is inherently fragile. The moment law enforcement applies structured, logical pressure to an accomplice who lacks professional criminal experience, the entire artificial construct collapses under the weight of guilt and psychological exhaustion. To prevent such devastating outcomes, communities must learn to cultivate heightened awareness and establish firm boundaries against emotional and financial manipulation. A key lesson from these cases is the critical importance of taking unusual statements seriously. When an individual casually mentions looking for a violent resolution to a marital or financial dispute, those around them must not dismiss these remarks as mere venting or harmless rants. Facilitating a culture of open communication and early intervention can disrupt a conspiracy before it ever manifests into physical harm. For law enforcement, the key to accelerating the resolution of hot profile cases lies in the immediate mobilization of independent, multi-jurisdictional task forces. By removing the investigation from local political pressures and familial influences, detectives can focus entirely on empirical evidence, ensuring that justice is pursued swiftly, objectively, and without compromise. The setting for this deep exploration of human nature and justice is the tranquil town of St. Charles, Missouri, situated beautifully on the banks of the Missouri River, approximately 20 miles from the bustling city of St. Louis. During the late 20th century, particularly in the early 90s, this area experienced a significant transition, evolving from a quiet, historical community into a rapidly growing haven for young professionals. It was a place where neighborhoods were closely knit, where the streets were lined with new developments, and where a general sense of safety and mutual trust prevailed among the residents. The community was one where everyone seemed to know everyone else, and the quiet rhythm of daily life was rarely interrupted by anything resembling serious conflict. It was on a peaceful Saturday, the 12th of October in the year 1991, that this serene environment was suddenly shattered. Shortly after noon, a telephone call was placed to the local emergency dispatch system by a young woman named Lisa Suter, in a tone that struck operators as remarkably composed, devoid of the typical panic or hysteria that usually accompanies a sudden domestic emergency. She reported that she had returned to her suburban home and discovered her husband, Alfred, completely unresponsive on the living room couch. She explained to the dispatcher that there was a significant amount of blood and that he appeared to have suffered a devastating injury. Emergency medical services and officers from the St. Charles County Sheriff Department were dispatched to the residence immediately. Upon arrival, first responders secured the perimeter and kept Lisa outside the home while they entered to assess the situation. Inside, they found Alfred Suter, warmly known to his friends and family as Freddie, sitting on the sofa in a natural position, as if he had been relaxing while watching television. It was immediately apparent that he had passed away, having sustained a fatal gunshot wound to the head. The projectile had entered from a high angle behind him, suggesting that the perpetrator had approached him while his back was turned, giving him no opportunity to defend himself or even realize the danger he was in. The scene was notably devoid of any signs of a struggle. The furniture was undisturbed, the drawers had not been ransacked, and there was no indication that a violent physical confrontation had taken place prior to the shooting. A single shell casing from a 9mm firearm was discovered resting on the cushions of the couch, a silent piece of evidence that would eventually speak volumes. As the initial shock settled, the community struggled to comprehend how such a gentle and widely respected man could meet such a tragic end. Alfred was born on the 1st of June in the year 1955 in the picturesque village of Grindelwald, Switzerland. Raised in the shadow of the spectacular Swiss Alps, he grew up with a love for adventure, nature, and the quiet, structured beauty of his homeland. By his mid-20s, Alfred had developed into an exceptionally talented engineer, earning a position at the international machinery manufacturer known as Hydromat. His precision, work ethic, and warm personality made him a beloved figure among his colleagues. In the year 1981, at the age of 26, Alfred was presented with a life-changing opportunity to relocate to the United States alongside his mentor and close friend, Bruno Schmitter, to establish a new branch of the company in the St. Louis area. He embraced the journey with enthusiasm, eager to pursue his own version of the American dream. After settling in St. Charles, Alfred bought a comfortable home and established a steady routine, spending his free time playing pool and socializing with a close circle of fellow European expatriates. He was known as a sparkling, friendly individual who went out of his way to help others. However, his life took a dramatic turn during an evening out with friends in the late 80s, when a young woman across the bar noticed him and sent a drink to his table as an introduction. That young woman was Lisa Dalton, who was 12 years his junior. Lisa was the youngest of 6 children born to Donald and Carlene Dalton, a family of immense prominence and influence in the St. Charles area. Her father, Judge Donald Dalton, was a highly respected figure who had served the local judicial system for over 40 years without ever losing an election. The Dalton name was synonymous with the preservation of law and order, which created a unique environment of privilege, but also a subtle pressure for the children to maintain a highly polished public image. At the time of their meeting, Lisa was 20 years old and Alfred was 32. Despite the age difference, Alfred was quickly captivated by her charm and youthful energy. A whirlwind romance ensued, and within less than a year, in the year 1987, the two were married. Alfred was overjoyed, believing he had found a loving partner with whom he could build a beautiful future. The Dalton family welcomed the talented Swiss engineer warmly, recognizing him as a stable, hard-working provider who could offer Lisa a comfortable lifestyle. Over the next few years, Lisa attempted to find her own professional path. Influenced perhaps by her family legacy of public service, she enrolled in the St. Charles County Police Academy with the goal of becoming a law enforcement officer. Her career in public safety, however, was brief and fraught with difficulty. After graduating from the academy, Lisa was hired as a probationary officer by the Hazelwood Police Department. Her field training evaluations were poor, with instructors noting that she struggled to meet the basic standards of the job and often displayed an attitude suggesting she expected others to perform her duties for her. Just as the department was considering extending her probationary period due to her performance issues, Lisa reported an ankle injury and promptly resigned, bringing a sudden end to her aspirations in law enforcement. Undeterred by this setback, Lisa decided to transition into the business world, launching a wholesale fragrance company called LA Designs in the year 1991. The business model involved purchasing bulk quantities of imitation perfumes and hiring independent sales representatives to sell them to the public. Alfred, always supportive of his wife, provided substantial financial backing to launch the venture, investing a significant portion of his hard-earned savings into her company. However, despite the enthusiastic efforts of the sales team, the business struggled to turn a profit, and Lisa quickly found herself sinking deeper into a quagmire of commercial and personal debt. As the detectives began their investigation into Alfred's passing, they immediately looked for physical clues within the home that might explain how an intruder could have gained entry. In the basement, they discovered a broken window, which at first glance suggested a classic forced entry. However, a closer examination of the window and the surrounding area revealed a critical discrepancy. The shards of glass were lying on the ground outside the house rather than inside the basement floor. This simple detail of physics indicated that the window had been broken from the inside, a clear sign of staging designed to mislead investigators. It became obvious that someone who had legitimate access to the house had manufactured the appearance of a break-in. The complexity of the case escalated rapidly when Judge Donald Dalton arrived at the active crime scene, requesting access to the home. Although the officers on the scene respected his prominent position in the community, they maintained the integrity of the investigation and politely informed him that he could not enter. Recognizing the potential for political complications and the immense influence of the Dalton family in St. Charles County, the Sheriff Department made the strategic decision to activate the Major Case Squad of Greater St. Louis. This allowed independent detectives from surrounding jurisdictions, who had no personal or professional ties to the local judiciary, to take over the inquiry, ensuring a completely objective and unbiased search for the truth. As the Major Case Squad began its work, they conducted another thorough search of the residence. On the kitchen counter, they found several of Alfred's personal firearms laid out alongside a cleaning kit, suggesting that he had been preparing to clean his collection before his life was tragically ended. The investigators wondered if an assailant had used one of Alfred's own weapons, but testing revealed that none of the guns on the counter matched the 9mm shell casing found on the couch. When detectives attempted to question Lisa about any missing firearms, her brother, Gene Dalton, a prominent local attorney, arrived to act as her legal counsel. Under his guidance, Lisa cooperated by showing officers where she kept her personal handguns. Upon searching the upper level of the house, they discovered that Lisa's personal 9mm Beretta pistol was missing from its storage place. When asked about her whereabouts during the time of the crime, Lisa provided an alibi, stating that she had spent the previous evening and night at the home of a close friend who also worked for her perfume company. This friend confirmed that Lisa had indeed stayed with her, which temporarily removed Lisa from the immediate physical suspect list. However, detectives were far from satisfied. They began interviewing Alfred's friends and colleagues, including his mentor, Bruno Schmitter. Bruno painted a starkly different picture of the Suter marriage than the happy, harmonious relationship Lisa had described. According to those close to Alfred, the marriage had been deteriorating rapidly. Lisa's habit of staying out late, partying, and bringing large groups of friends to the house at all hours of the night had placed an immense strain on Alfred, who needed rest for his demanding engineering career. Further interviews with Alfred's co-workers at Hydromat revealed even more chilling details. The marriage had suffered a temporary separation in the past, and when Lisa returned, the financial strain only increased. Alfred had grown tired of continually pouring money into her failing perfume business with absolutely no return. Coworkers reported that the couple was no longer sharing a bedroom, and that Alfred had expressed a strong desire for a divorce. He had been actively trying to get Lisa to move out of the house, but she adamantly refused, declaring that she wanted to keep both the residence and Alfred's financial assets. Most disturbing of all, one coworker recalled a conversation in which Alfred confessed that he had woken up in the middle of the night to find Lisa pointing a handgun directly at his head, casually telling him that she could end his life whenever she pleased. Alfred had become increasingly fearful for his safety, a tragic premonition that was now a reality. Detectives also conducted a detailed financial audit of Lisa's business and personal accounts, discovering that she was over $100,000 in debt. Her perfume company was essentially operating as a failing venture, and she was desperate for a financial lifeline. Investigators learned that Alfred had recently obtained a life insurance policy valued at $100,000. Shortly before his passing, Lisa had contacted the insurance provider in an attempt to double the policy amount to $200,000. But the request was denied because she could not secure Alfred's necessary signature. This financial motive was powerful, but detectives still needed to identify the individual who had physically carried out the deed. They turned their attention to Lisa's social and professional circle. They contacted Debbie Young, a close friend of Lisa's from their time at the police academy. Debbie described Lisa as a highly manipulative individual who possessed an extraordinary ability to get men to do almost anything for her. Debbie recalled a classmate named Richard, who had been completely infatuated with Lisa during their training, showering her with gifts and attention. Although Lisa eventually ended the pursuit, Richard had remained a figure of interest. Detectives brought Richard in for questioning, but he cooperated fully, providing a verifiable and airtight alibi that completely ruled him out of any involvement in the crime. However, the search for a suspect took a decisive no when investigators began interviewing employees at LA Designs. Several staff members reported that a 23-year-old employee named Danny Johnson had developed an intense, almost obsessive devotion to Lisa. Danny was described as a quiet, submissive individual who followed Lisa around like a loyal pet, eager to please her in any way possible. He had frequently bragged to others that he was a former police officer from Salt Lake City, Utah, a claim that detectives quickly debunked. A background check revealed that Danny had no history in law enforcement, but did possess a prior criminal record in another jurisdiction. He was currently renting a room from a local woman named Dorothy, who viewed him as a surrogate son and had tried to help him get back on his feet. Detectives paid a visit to Dorothy, who provided a critical breakthrough in the case. She confirmed that Danny was deeply in love with Lisa and believed they were going to be married. More importantly, Dorothy revealed that in the days leading up to the tragedy, Danny had made several highly concerning remarks. He had told her that Lisa was actively searching for a contract actor to remove her husband from the equation so they could be together. Danny had later commented that because they were having trouble finding someone to do the deed, he would have to take care of it himself. Dorothy had dismissed these statements as empty boasts, but she also recalled a chilling detail from the night of the 11th of October. She had walked into her living room and witnessed Danny sitting quietly, carefully cleaning a semi-automatic handgun. Equipped with this vital testimony, the major case squad brought Danny Johnson in for questioning on the 14th of October. Although he initially denied any knowledge of the crime, he agreed to undergo a polygraph examination. The results indicated deception when Danny was asked specific questions regarding his involvement in Alfred S. passing and the location of the murder weapon. Recognizing that his narrative was crumbling, detectives confronted him with the physical evidence and Dorothy S. statements. Faced with the reality of his situation, Danny broke down and delivered a full confession, exposing the entire dark conspiracy. Danny explained that Lisa had convinced him that the only way they could ever build a life together and access the substantial financial assets and insurance money was to eliminate Alfred. She had meticulously designed a plan to make the tragedy look like a home invasion gone wrong. She instructed Danny on how to stage the scene, directing him to break the basement window to simulate a forced entry, and she provided him with her own 9mm Beretta pistol to use. Danny confessed that he had initially gone to the house on the 10th of October to carry out the deed, but had lost his nerve and left. An angry Lisa had sent him back the following night, ordering him to complete the task. On the evening of the 11th of October, Alfred, completely unaware of the conspiracy, welcomed Danny into his home. The two men spent the evening watching television and talking. When Alfred eventually fell asleep on the couch, Danny stood behind him, drew the 9mm Beretta from beneath his jacket, and carried out the plan. In his subsequent panic, Danny failed to stage the home invasion convincingly, breaking the basement window from the inside rather than the outside, and failing to ransack the house as Lisa had instructed. He then fled the scene, driving over the bridge, crossing the Missouri River, and discarding the handgun into the deep water below. On the 15th of October, armed with Danny S.'s detailed confession, law enforcement moved to arrest Lisa Suter. Her arrest sent shockwaves through the St. Charles community, as the daughter of the presiding circuit judge was formally charged with first-degree murder. Due to her family's wealth and resources, she was able to post a property bond of $500,000 using her parents' home as collateral, allowing her to remain free on bail while awaiting trial. The legal proceedings presented a unique challenge, as all 4 circuit judges in St. Charles County recused themselves from the case due to their personal and professional relationships with Judge Donald Dalton. To ensure a fair trial, the venue was moved over 2 hours away to Boone County, in the city of Columbia, Missouri. The trial began on the 22nd of February in the year 1993. The prosecution's case was incredibly strong. Danny Johnson, having accepted a plea agreement that sentenced him to life in prison, without the possibility of parole, took the stand as the star witness. He detailed the entire manipulation, the financial desperation of Lisa, and her central role as the mastermind of the conspiracy. To further solidify her guilt, the prosecution presented testimony from 2 other men whom Lisa had previously approached, offering them financial compensation to harm her husband. These witnesses left a clear trail of evidence, showing that Lisa had been actively plotting Alfred S.'s demise for a significant period. Lisa S.'s defense team attempted to discredit the witnesses, portraying them as individuals seeking attention, and argued that Lisa was simply a young, overwhelmed woman trapped in an unhappy marriage that her parents would not allow her to leave. They suggested that Danny had acted entirely on his own volition, out of an obsessive desire to win her affection. However, the jury was nuts by this defense. The physical evidence, combined with the consistent testimonies of multiple witnesses, pointed directly to Lisa's guilt. On the 25th of February, in the year 1993, the jury returned a verdict of guilty of murder in the first degree. Lisa Suter was subsequently sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that she would spend the rest of her days reflecting on the devastating consequences of her greed. This tragic case stands as a solemn reminder of the devastating impact of unchecked entitlement and the pursuit of unearned wealth. It highlights the profound truth that physical evidence and logical consistency will always prevail over manufactured deception. For the community of St. Charles, the loss of Alfred Suter was a heartbreaking event that took a piece of their collective faith in humanity. Yet the dedicated efforts of the Major Case Squad and the ultimate triumph of justice served to honor Alfred S.'s memory. His friends and colleagues chose to remember him not by the tragic circumstances of his passing, but by his infectious smile, his brilliant mind, and the warm, adventurous spirit he brought with him from the quiet mountains of Switzerland to the heart of America. The human desire for security, status, and wealth is a common thread that runs through the history of social development. In moderation, these aspirations drive individuals to innovate, build, and contribute meaningfully to their communities. However, when these desires detach from ethical boundaries and transform into an insatiable demand for instant gratification, the results can be catastrophic. The tragic loss of Alfred Suter, a respected Swiss engineer who sought the American dream only to find his life cut short in a web of greed and manipulation, serves as a profound case study in the anatomy of betrayal. To understand why such crimes occur with troubling frequency, one must look beyond the immediate violence and examine the psychological undercurrents of entitlement, superficiality, and the toxic dynamics of manipulative relationships. Crimes motivated by financial gain often arise from a stark disparity between an individual's personal desires and their willingness to put in the honest effort required to achieve them. In many such cases, there exists a psychological trait often referred to as an extreme sense of entitlement. This mindset convinces a person that they deserve a high-status lifestyle, luxury assets, and continuous financial rescue without having to bear the responsibility of labor or fiscal discipline. When paired with a superficial charm, this entitlement can allow a person to manipulate others into funding their ambitions. However, when the external sources of funding begin to dry up, or when the benefactor decides to establish healthy boundaries, the entitled individual often experiences a sense of intense anger and desperation. Rather than adapting or seeking honest employment, they begin to view the benefactor not as a partner or a human being, but as an obstacle to be permanently removed. These tragedies occur frequently because human relationships can sometimes be built on false premises, where one partner misinterprets superficial charm for genuine affection. In a highly connected yet often isolated society, hardworking and sincere individuals can easily fall prey to manipulative personalities who view relationships as purely transactional. The victim, often characterized by a generous, supportive, and trusting nature, continues to extend help, believing that their partner is simply experiencing a temporary setback. This mismatch in values creates a dangerous environment where the manipulator steadily increases their demands, eventually escalating to extreme measures when their control is threatened. In tracking down the perpetrators of such calculated acts, law enforcement agencies rely on a combination of physical evidence, behavioral patterns, and rigorous financial analysis. The most critical clues often lie in the subtle inconsistencies left behind by the perpetrators, who, despite their attempts at cleverness, frequently succumb to the limits of their own understanding. In the investigation of Alfred Suter's passing, the police were immediately confronted with physical details that did not align with a standard home invasion. One of the primary clues was the state of the broken basement window. While the scene was staged to suggest an intruder had forced their way into the home, forensic analysis of the glass shattered on the ground revealed a simple truth of physics. The glass was lying on the outside of the house rather than the inside. This indicated that the window had been broken from the inside, instantly pointing to an internal staging effort rather than an external intrusion. Furthermore, the absence of a struggle and the specific trajectory of the injury suggested that the victim was entirely comfortable with the person in his presence. An intruder typically creates a sense of alarm, whereas a trusted companion or a silent partner can approach without raising suspicion. Investigators also pay close attention to the behavior of those closest to the victim in the immediate aftermath of a tragedy. An unusually calm, detached demeanor during emergency calls can sometimes indicate psychological preparation or shock, prompting investigators to look deeper. Additionally, the sudden disappearance of specific personal property, such as a legally owned family firearm that matches the caliber of the casing found at the scene, provides a direct path to identifying the weapon used. The sophisticated nature of modern criminal investigations lies in the ability to look past the immediate physical scene and reconstruct the financial and social lives of those involved. Financial forensics often reveal the true motive long before a confession is obtained. By examining bank statements, business debts, and sudden changes to life insurance policies, investigators can map out the timeline of desperation that precedes a crime. In this case, a mountain of debt exceeding $100,000 combined with an attempt to double a life insurance policy without the necessary consent provided a clear and undeniable motive. When these financial red flags are combined with social intelligence gathered from friends, co-workers, and neighbors, the true picture of a deteriorating relationship and a desperate plot begins to emerge. Despite their attempts at sophistication, criminals who plan such acts almost always leave behind a trail of behavioral crumbs. The attempt to solicit multiple individuals to carry out a crime is a common error among desperate minds. It reveals a fundamental lack of understanding of human nature, as the conspirator assumes that others share their disregard for human life and law. Each attempt to recruit an accomplice increases the circle of knowledge, creating multiple witnesses who can later testify to the premeditation of the act. The eventual recruitment of a submissive, easily influenced individual might achieve the immediate task, but it also creates a weak link in the conspiracy. An accomplice who acts out of infatuation rather than conviction is highly susceptible to psychological pressure during interrogation, quickly unraveling the entire scheme when confronted with the reality of their actions. Preventing such tragic cases requires a collective commitment to community awareness, early intervention, and the recognition of toxic relationship dynamics. One of the most vital life lessons to be drawn from this tragedy is the importance of recognizing the warning signs of coercive control and intimidation. When a partner utilizes threats, even under the guise of humor or dark playfulness, it must be taken seriously. A relationship that features extreme financial dependence, coupled with a refusal to communicate or cooperate, should be evaluated with caution. Society must encourage individuals to seek help and establish clear boundaries when they feel unsafe, and communities must foster environments where neighbors, friends, and coworkers feel empowered to speak up when they observe troubling behavior or hear alarming statements. For law enforcement forces, the experience of solving such high-profile cases highlights several strategies for catching perpetrators more rapidly. First, the swift preservation of the digital and physical scene is paramount. Gathering financial records, communication logs, and secure testimonies from associates in the earliest hours of an investigation prevents the destruction of evidence. Second, the utilization of specialized multi-jurisdictional task forces, such as a major case squad, allows investigators to pool resources, share intelligence across county lines, and insulate the investigation from local political or social pressures. This ensures that the pursuit of justice remains entirely objective and focused solely on the facts of the case. Finally, the strategic use of investigative tools, such as polygraph examinations and targeted interviews of peripheral associates, can quickly eliminate dead ends and focus resources on the primary suspects. To understand the full scope of this tragic event, one must step back to the quiet, snow-draped valleys of Switzerland, where the story of Alfred Suter began. Born on June 1, 1955, in the picturesque mountain village of Grindelwald, Alfred, known affectionately to his friends and family as Freddie, grew up surrounded by the breathtaking beauty of the Swiss Alps. His childhood was spent in a land of towering peaks, traditional wooden chalets, and a tight-knit community that valued hard work, precision, and mutual respect. From a young age, Freddie exhibited a natural curiosity for how things worked, a trait that naturally led him toward the field of engineering. He possessed an infectious smile, a warm personality, and a genuine kindness that endeared him to everyone he met. By his mid-20s, Freddie had developed into an exceptionally gifted engineer, earning a position at the internationally renowned machinery manufacturer Hydromat. His dedication to his craft and his brilliant analytical mind did not go unnoticed. In the year 1981, when Freddie was 26 years old, his mentor and close friend, Bruno Schmitter, offered him a life-changing opportunity. The company decided to expand its operations to the United States, and Bruno wanted Freddie by his side to help establish a new branch in the St. Louis area of Missouri. Excited by the prospect of adventure and eager to pursue the American dream, Freddie packed his bags and relocated to the Midwestern United States. In Missouri, Freddie and Bruno worked tirelessly to build the new Hydromat branch from the ground up. Freddie's technical expertise was crucial to the company's early success, and he quickly earned the respect of his colleagues and clients. Despite the challenges of adapting to a new culture and language, Freddie embraced his new life with enthusiasm. He purchased a comfortable home in the up-and-coming community of St. Charles, a historic town situated on the scenic banks of the Missouri River, just 20 miles from the bustling city of St. Louis. In the late 1980s, St. Charles was a rapidly growing suburb that attracted young professionals seeking a peaceful, family-oriented environment where everyone knew their neighbors. Freddie found a sense of belonging among a close group of fellow expatriates and local friends. He enjoyed the simple pleasures of life, often spending his evenings at a local establishment playing pool, sharing stories, and laughing with his companions. It was during one of these casual evenings, after living in Missouri for 6 years, that Freddie's life took an unexpected turn. While sitting at the bar with his friends, the bartender approached Freddie and handed him a cold beverage, explaining that a young woman across the room had ordered it for him. Intrigued and flattered, Freddie walked over to express his gratitude, introducing himself to a 20-year-old woman named Lisa Dalton. 12 years Freddie S. Jr., Lisa Dalton was a striking young woman who came from one of the most prominent and influential families in St. Charles County. She was the youngest of 6 children born to Judge Donald Dalton and his wife Carlene. For more than 40 years, Judge Dalton had been a towering figure in the local judiciary, having never lost an election for public office. In St. Charles, the Dalton name was synonymous with law, order, and social prestige. Growing up in a household of privilege, Lisa had experienced a life of comfort and high social standing. However, this prominent family background also brought with it a subtle pressure to live up to the family name and maintain a certain standard of success. When Lisa graduated from high school in the year 1985, she enrolled in college, where she maintained average to above average grades. Despite her family's expectations, Lisa seemed to struggle with finding her own direction in life. When she met Freddie across the bar that evening, she was drawn to his maturity, his successful career, and his gentle, polite demeanor. For Freddie, who was 32 at the time, Lisa represented youth, energy, and a connection to the local community. A whirlwind romance blossomed almost immediately. Freddie was completely captivated by Lisa's charm, and within less than a year of their first meeting, the couple was married in the year 1987. Lisa moved into Freddie's home in St. Charles, and for a time Freddie was overjoyed. He believed he had found the love of his life and was eager to build a bright future with his new bride. The Dalton family welcomed the brilliant Swiss engineer with open arms, viewing him as a stable, hard-working provider who could offer Lisa a comfortable life. Seeking to find her own professional path, Lisa eventually left college and decided to pursue a career in law enforcement. She applied for and was accepted into the St. Charles County Police Academy, a move that pleased her family given their deep roots in the judicial system. However, Lisa's career in law enforcement would prove to be brief. After graduating from the academy, she was hired as a probationary officer by the Hazelwood Police Department. During her field training phase, her performance fell short of expectations. Her training officers noted that she had a difficult time accepting constructive feedback and exhibited a personality that suggested she expected others to do the heavy lifting for her. Realizing that she was unlikely to pass her probationary period successfully, Lisa made a sudden decision. After suffering a minor ankle injury, she resigned from the department, bringing a quiet end to her aspirations of wearing a badge. In the year 1991, Lisa decided to pivot toward the world of business. She launched a wholesale fragrance company called LA Designs, which specialized in selling imitation versions of well-known designer perfumes. She secured financial backing from investors, with Freddie providing a significant portion of the capital to help get the venture off the ground. Lisa hired several employees, many of whom were young, energetic individuals eager to earn money by selling perfume door-to-door or at local businesses. At the start, there was an atmosphere of excitement surrounding the company, with employees believing they could make a fortune under Lisa's leadership. But behind the scenes, the reality of LA Designs was far less promising. The business model operated much like a pyramid scheme, where the margins were thin and the costs of purchasing the imitation cologne from out-of-state suppliers quickly began to outpace the revenue generated by the sales force. As the business began to falter, Lisa's financial situation deteriorated rapidly. Rather than adjusting her business strategy or cutting her losses, she continuously turned to Freddie for more money, begging him to keep her dream afloat. Freddie, who valued financial responsibility and had worked hard for every dollar he earned, grew increasingly frustrated by the constant drain on their household finances. The financial strain began to take a heavy toll on the Suter marriage. The couple drifted apart, eventually sleeping in separate bedrooms. Freddie realized that the relationship was no longer viable and began expressing his desire for a divorce, urging Lisa to move out of the house. However, Lisa refused to leave. She had grown accustomed to the comfort of the St. Charles home and the financial stability that Freddie provided. For Lisa, a divorce meant losing her access to wealth and admitting failure to her prominent family. As her debts mounted, exceeding $100,000, her frustration turned into a quiet, simmering resentment. To intimidate Freddie and reassert her control, Lisa began to exhibit deeply unsettling behavior. On one occasion, Freddie confided in a close coworker that he had woken up in the middle of the night to find Lisa standing over him, pointing a handgun directly at his head. When he reacted in fear, she coldly told him that she could do whatever she wanted to him at any time. This chilling incident left Freddie living in a state of constant anxiety, realizing that the woman he had married had become someone he no longer recognized or trusted. As the business continued to slide toward bankruptcy, Lisa began exploring other avenues to resolve her financial problems. Freddie had recently obtained a life insurance policy worth $100,000. Seeing this as a potential solution to her debts, Lisa contacted the insurance provider in an attempt to increase the coverage to $200,000. However, her efforts were blocked because the policy modification required Freddie's signature, which he refused to provide. It was during this period of increasing desperation that Lisa began to formulate a dark plan to free herself from the marriage while securing the financial payout she desperately craved. At her company, Lisa had developed a close, flirtatious relationship with a 23-year-old employee named Danny Johnson. Danny was an impressionable young man who had arrived in St. Charles with a troubled past and a desire to reinvent himself. He frequently told people that he was a former police officer from Salt Lake City, a claim that was entirely fabricated to mask his modest background and minor criminal record. Danny was completely infatuated with Lisa, acting like a devoted follower who would do almost anything to win her affection. Lisa, recognizing his vulnerability and devotion, began an affair with him, using his feelings to manipulate him into becoming an instrument in her plan. Lisa convinced Danny that they had a bright future together, promising him marriage and financial security once they were free of Freddie. She painted Freddie as an abusive, uncaring obstacle to their happiness. Over several weeks, Lisa began to plant the seeds of violence, telling Danny that the only way they could truly be together was if Freddie was removed from the picture. She initially tried to find an outside individual to carry out the deed, even soliciting 2 other acquaintances, offering them money to commit the act. However, those individuals declined, leaving Lisa to turn to the one person who was too infatuated to say no. Lisa designed a plan that she believed would shield her from suspicion. The crime was to be staged to look like a home invasion that had gone terribly wrong. She instructed Danny on how to enter the house, where the household firearms were kept, and how to create the appearance of a forced entry. To ensure her own alibi was airtight, Lisa arranged to spend the night of Friday, October 11th, 1991, at the home of a close friend and employee, celebrating a minor business milestone, and staying far away from St. Charles. On that fateful Friday evening, Danny Johnson went to the Suter residence,